This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, Isotope, JZ Microphones, and Solid State Logic. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and C610 complementer with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. So please remember to check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show. And now, get ready to rock.
You shouldn't worry about what other people are doing as far as who got this band or who got that band to come into their studio or whatever. You just have to focus on doing the best job you can do. And I think I worried about that too much when I was younger and starting out. You know what I mean? Just for my own peace of mind, I would tell myself that. And it's funny when you're younger, it's like you're real competitive and you're hungry, you know, but you kind of have to be like, you know, it's cool.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One Reaper, or whatever you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. The JZ Microphone Vintage series are built by hand in Latvia, featuring the patented golden drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings that classic vintage tone. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 mic. Our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to Recording Studio Rockstars listeners, so use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the V67, V47, and V12 microphones. Go to jzmic.com and get your vintage mic now. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jon Fintel, a producer engineer in Columbus, Ohio, and owner of Relay Recording Studio. Some of his clients are artists like Way Yes, the Worn Flints, Snarls, Girl Fox, and Mark Lomax are just a few of the artists that he's worked with at Relay. Jon has also been a fantastic guest on the show a while back on episode RSR386 to share his backstory and talk about recording at Relay Recording Studio. And today, I'm psyched to have Jon back here joining us to talk about what's new at the studio, dive into some more recording and mixing tips for your studio rockstars. And a shout out and a thank you also, again, to Jason Knox for making our original introduction. Thank you, Jason. So please welcome back Jon Fintel to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jon, are you ready to rock, dude?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm ready to rock. Definitely.
It's great to have you back, man.
Thanks.
I remember I really enjoyed talking to you the last time. I dug all the music you were doing. Your studio sounds like a really cool place. And it was fun to go back and take a look at the website again and just see it looks like you're making it a fun place to record for all the artists you're working with.
Well, thanks. It's a brand new website, if you looked recently.
I figured it was probably a brand new website, so maybe we can even start there. What are some of the things, we'll talk about the studio stuff, but let's just start at the website since we're there. What are some of the things that you discovered, or what actions did you take to kind of upgrade your website and make it look snazzy. Because it was pretty sweet, man. I went to it and it's like, nice video clips of the console and stuff like that.
That's because I'm friends with a lot of people in the video community here in town. So we borrowed a slider, and I borrowed my best pal, James, and he shot a big video for me. So
slider is in sliding the camera, not a slider like SLIGHTER, like somebody who insults everybody else in the studio.
No, he's insulting, but it was a slider that we used for the camera. So yeah, that's how we did it. We just used one of those big rail devices, and it was like on a little baby dolly all over the studio.
That's cool. Well, that actually sounds to me, to be honest, like the easy part. Getting some cool looking video is one thing to do, but then sometimes just figuring out, like, how do you actually have a website where you've got a cool video clip and it all works and all that kind of stuff. What did you use for your website, and what did you learn about trying to include video like that?
I used another person.
Nice.
I didn't do that myself.
Okay, cool. I can see here, because I'm all super ninja, so I'm already looking at the code here, and I can see that it's a Squarespace website. So that's a good tip, Rockstars. If you dig Jon's website at relayrecording.com, then that is the look of a Squarespace site.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cool.
Somebody with a good eye does definitely help.
Absolutely, because I've done website stuff myself, and it's amazing how you see these ads. You're like, oh, that would be so cool. And then you go to do one. You're like, why does mine look so freaking stupid right now? I can't even figure out how do I move this thing over to the left and stuff like that,
Right.
So it helps to have somebody with a good eye, but it's also, honestly, it's also really helpful to just see an example of something that's working really well and then just go, okay, at least I'll start with that tool,
Right. Yeah, Squarespace it's been pretty easy. So in fact, I actually edited my equipment list this morning when I realized that I had my old Pro Tools system on there and a couple other things that were outdated. So it used to say it had an HD3 Excel system. So
you know what? The truth is, would any band even know what the hell that stuff is?
I don't know.
Would they care?
I don't know. Probably not.
So I can see in the image here, some pretty sweet looking stuff in your studio. You still have the the Series 80B Trident console.
I do. Yeah, the thing's been fantastic, and it's old, so it's still it's almost 40, Lidge.
Wow.
Yeah, so it has a little, some things here and there that you end up having to learn how to work around. But I like the board. I'm glad I got it, and I'm very close to paying it off. So there.
Wow. I hope it didn't take you 40 years to pay it off.
It did not. It was maybe 6.
Nice.
So, and you got rid of your MCI, correct?
I did. Yeah, I actually decided to make a transition, and when I installed my Phantom Focus system, which is the speaker system that sounds great, part of that was making sure that I didn't have anything in the way, and I decided to get an Argosy console just so I could basically have a fancy desk for digital controllers and start mixing that way. Mm-hmm. It was a tough decision to make, man, because it's just so awesome having an analog console in the studio.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for tracking, definitely.
Yeah.
And anymore, I don't know if you want to get into this yet, but if I'm mixing and I'm doing it through the console, it's pretty much a hybrid thing. So I'm stemming out Pro Tools and,
How often do you find yourself doing that now? I mean, I know we talked about that stuff the first time, but it's been a few years, so you've probably adjusted like we all have.
Less, I would say, less and less, and it kind of depends on the client that I'm working with. The last one I did was with Evan Westfall. He plays in that band Camp. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're on the bigger side, but anyway.
Nice.
I was doing a project with him, and I asked him, like, do you want me to go through the board? Do you want me to do it in the box? And he's like, well, go through the board, of course. So that was the last time I did that, and that's been probably 8 months ago was the last time.
So that was the mixing aspect was done through the console?
Yeah. So, and the way I have it split up, because it's a 32-channel board, is I'm using the first 16 typically for tracking, and that stuff sort of stays like that. And then the next 16 I'm mixing through. So it just allows me to sort of leave the board up longer than, I can wait for people to judge the mixes or whatever, make changes a little bit longer that way,
So that's cool. So sort of half the faders are just feeding inputs into Pro Tools, and then the other half are the returns. So even as you set a level on something that you're recording, you're already hearing it back through the console mix while you're working.
I'm actually not. I'm listening through it's just coming out of Pro Tools. I don't have it set up so it automatically comes out of the board that way. Mostly because so many of the things never come back out of Pro Tools and go through the board.
All right, maybe you should explain to us a little more so I understand it. When you're ready to mix through the board, do you have to switch something around in your studio or repatch to do that?
No, there's no repatching. I just set the outputs. I have like 32 ins and outs on my Symphony. So right. I just have the second 16 automatically going out into the board.
Okay, so I'm going to back up and make sure I'm understanding. So the first 16 is faders that you can record through the console going into Pro Tools?
Yep.
Okay, and then while you're working, you just listen to a stereo return of Pro Tools, but when you're ready to start mixing, you switch those tracks to different subgroups and outputs to the second 16 faders?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's it.
All right.
Yeah, so it's like two different boards, basically.
And would there ever be a good reason to monitor broken out through the board while you're working, or is it more just for convenience? You might as well just come out as a 2-track and then just let the board mixing be like an additional level of kind of sweetening it.
Yeah, it's just for sheer convenience. And the fact that most things and less things as I go on are coming out through the console. So some of them never make it,
right.
into the board. They're getting mixed in the box. So there's no reason to listen through the console and then unlisten through the console,
Some of them never make it. I don't know why.
I know, that sounded terrible.
No, I just don't know why, but I had this image of like sex ed class and they're showing these little guys swimming upstream. Some of them never make it. But so apologies to anybody who doesn't like that.
Only the stronger songs get through my console.
Yeah. Well, all right. So cool, man. Let's see. Well, I'm looking at other stuff. It looks like you maybe have like a massive passive EQ.
Mm-hmm.
Are you mixing with sort of Pro Tools HDX or something like that?
Yeah, I am. It's Pro Tools Ultimate. And then I've got the outboard chassis.
Oh yeah, you said the Symphony IO.
Yep. Yeah, and I have a Mac Mini that's just all kind of maxed out. So that's what I'm using for Pro Tools.
Oh, okay, cool. I think in the photo I'm still seeing the Mac Pro
cheese
Tower.
Grater.
Yeah, the cheese grater. I actually just retired mine. It's by my feet here in the podcast booth.
Yeah, mine is still there. I never moved it. So
it's hard, man. The cheese grater, the Mac Pro was such a workhorse, such a great computer. Sometimes it's tough when we do these upgrades because, we sort of have to, because that's where the computer world is going. But a lot of the gear that we were using on our old rig is just super solid, and it's sort of a shame to let it go.
Right. And you're like, why am I doing this? And it's all because there's another version of some software that came out. It makes it incompatible with anything else. A lot of it was like I couldn't buy a new plug-in at the time that I switched over to the new system. So that was kind of annoying.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So you've got the Mac Mini, and then do you have to have an expansion bay or something like that so that you can tie that into your Symphony, or how does all that?
Yeah, it's work? Which chassis is it? It's I want to say it's a Sonnet. Is that the chassis that is used?
That is one of the chassis. Yeah, I've got an Avid chassis for my HDX card.
Yeah, it's kind of hiding behind this rack of stuff. I have a little shelf back there that it lives on. So I haven't looked at it since I got the new system.
And are you on the M1, the silicon chip version of the Mac Mini?
No, I'm still. It's an i7 Intel. So I bought it, and then of course they come out with a new chip. Not that much.
That's all right. I got the one with the new chip, and it took me like 6 months to even plug it in. By the time I actually get it running, there's a new computer out. That's just the nature of what we got to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And it wasn't compatible for a while with Pro Tools, right?
Well, I mean, isn't that the case with everything all the time, every time?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
It's the joy of Avid.
Yeah, I think, well, hopefully, Rockstars, when you hear this, we will have recorded this earlier. So by the time you hear this, then these compatibility issues will be over. And so hopefully you can just point your finger at the speakers and laugh at us.
Right.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's see what else you got. What's that funny looking thing with blue lights on it? It looks like a fancy looking tube mic preamp or something like that. Big fat knob on it and a little window. It makes me look like I'm looking at
does it look like a Fairchild?
No, it looks like some rounded piece of gear, like with a little window into an embryo from the Matrix or something on one side of it.
Oh, is that a blue?
Maybe is that a blue mic pre? Is that a
Robbie? Is it the blue Robbie? Is that what it is?
It might be. Yeah, is that a little window where you can see the tube?
Yeah, I should. Oh yeah, that's the blue Robbie. Awesome. Yep.
And then the distressors.
I have a pair of distressors.
Yeah. What do you find those most fun for?
I use them for vocals. I use them for overheads when I'm tracking. If I'm mixing in the console, that's basically my drum bus goes out to that. The smash bus.
Yeah.
That I'm hitting the drums pretty hard with goes to the distressors. They're great for anything. I mean, what can't the distressors do?
My laundry.
Socks. They don't work well with socks.
What's underneath the distressors? Are those more compressors? They're sort of black double rack space things. Right
now, nothing is. I have to bring up my website here for me.
It's all right. That's all right. Put you on the spot.
Well, I'm trying to think, like the stuff that I have in this rack now.
Well, look at your gear list too. And also, we don't have to just sit here and talk about gear the whole time. But tell us about what's exciting for you. I mean, like last time we spoke was a few years ago. What kind of stuff is new in the studio? You got the new computer. Any other things that you're really excited about? I think you got into some new mics, right? You were telling me some of the Jay-Z mics you were digging.
I did. I bought a pair from your suggestion, actually. Bought a pair of the Jay-Z BB29s.
Sweet, and we're still friends?
Yes, we are. We're still friends. Nice. We're better friends, actually, because you said that. So,
I think I saw a V11 as an overhead on drums in one of your videos.
I think I used that as a mono. Yeah, that was pretty recently, too. I use that as a mono overhead, and then I have a pair of Lewitt tube microphones that I use.
Oh, the 9...
They're the 840s.
840s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are great.
Oh, yeah. Ever since I started using those in overheads, it's like I don't use anything else now for anything. Because the overheads were bothering me. You go through periods where there's something that's just like, these cymbals just sound like shit all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're the best cymbals in the world, but I haven't had that since I got these things up there.
What is it? What do they sound like to you now? I mean, what's the difference?
The cymbals?
Yeah.
They're just a lot warmer, and you don't have those little peaks that sort of tear your head off. Usually there's one around 7K, 7 or 8K. It doesn't have that. And I haven't even looked at the frequency graph of these microphones. I just,
I'm not sure if I can remember the last time I looked at a frequency graph of something.
Well, I looked at the Jay-Z ones, so before I bought these.
Adam Audio introduces the all-new A7V monitor with rotatable HPS waveguide for the accelerated ribbon tweeter and advanced onboard DSP-based room correction using the included A-Control software or optional SonarWorks software with a measurement mic, allowing you to tune your speakers for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at adamaudio.com. It's amazing that we can create professional mixes using a computer in our home studios. But trying to mix with a mouse, it's like trying to play the guitar with the tip of a pencil. It sucks. And why shouldn't you be able to mix as naturally as you play the guitar? That's why I upgraded my studio to include the SSL UF8 fader pack and UC1 channel strip controllers. They let me mix as fast as I can feel the music. Go put the fun back into your mixes at solidstatelogic.com. You know, I've experienced that too. I've definitely dealt with overheads on the drums and not liked where it put me later on when I was feeling frustrated about the, the harshness in the cymbals and stuff like that. Sometimes I go back and forth. One of the things I really notice is that a huge amount of whether I hate the mic on the cymbal actually has to do with the drummer and that particular project. Like, whether they're just smashing the cymbals or whether it's sort of a light touch. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the really light touch indie rock stuff, I prefer a bright condenser because it brings out detail. And then on other stuff, I love the sound of these. I got a pair of the Alder Audio H44S ribbon mics up there now. And same experience as you. It like smooths out the harshness and it just makes rock and roll stuff just sound like way more easy to control.
Oh yeah. It's you can sort of separate the good drummers from the, just live bashers in the studio. It's so evident, and it can ruin some good drums if somebody just crashes like crazy,
Yeah. How do you feel about that as an engineer though? Like, do you feel like, do you ever struggle with wanting to describe a musician as, a basher, for example, versus saying, you know what, I need to somehow have a solution for that and be able to accommodate that style of musician when I'm recording them?
To some degree, but there's only so much you can do. You know what I mean? It's like if somebody is hitting the things so hard that the cymbals don't even sound good in the room. I mean, you can't really curb that too much. And then it's in every other mic that you have on the drums. And, so it's a little of both.
Yeah. Listening to your playlist, Rockstars, we got a playlist of Jon's work in the show notes. So just scroll down. There should be like a Spotify playlist or something there. But just like kind of flipping around, one of the things that I definitely did notice is you seem to have a really nice handle on drums where like the cymbals weren't sounding harsh to me. Nothing was sounding harsh there. And you had a really effective way of making the snare kind of sound like it was in its own space with the drum kit in a cool way. Share some thoughts about that. I mean, do you ever find yourself using drum triggers to try and help with drum recordings, or do you find that it's more about careful, gating and adding additional reverbs or spaces to the drum mix?
There are times when I use a sample along with it, and it's usually a sample that sounds kind of like the drum. If they're using my kit, that's pretty easy to, pull up a sample of my own snare.
Do you spend time actually creating samples of your own kit, so you've always got them on hand?
No.
You just know which ones work.
Yeah, I know which ones work, and I do have samples of my own kit, and those are really, it's rare that I use a different sample that is not my own kit or something that was done here anyway. Yeah, so I mean, I have like a Black Beauty that most people use. I have a Yamaha custom something that is also used, so I have different samples for different drums. And it's always like a little bit. I'm never using just the sample because that always sounds super weird to me. So it's usually, if it might be like 25% of the snare sound, and if it's at the very most, it might be 50. So and that has something to do with on occasion if you get a drummer that's not hitting the drum in the middle, so they get off center on the snare drum, and you get this goink, and it is the most annoying thing ever. So that's when the sample will sort of take some ownership in that snare sound sample.
What about rim shot? I mean, I always misunderstood rim shot for many years, where I was thinking of rim shot as a side stick, but rim shot is actually when you hit the snare and it's also hitting the rim with your stick. Is that something that you find is good for drummers to do? Or when you say they're hitting the center of the drum, do you prefer it when There's no rim shot in there, or is this not even the right question?
It depends on the genre, I guess. If I'm doing pretty heavy rock, or stuff that is even like 80s ish, then the rim shot stuff sounds pretty good because it's a little bit thinner and it cuts through, and it sounds like stuff that was recorded in that era.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what I do is I'm doing a lot of indie stuff and have for a long time. So with that, it doesn't seem to make as much sense because it's sort of like a dated, out of place sound for a lot of the indie stuff that I do.
Yeah.
And in which case it's like you're just hitting it right in the center of the snare.
Yeah, just something really simple.
Yeah, and I most of the time it's like this Black Beauty I've tuned down pretty far, and I'll even use like a really big fat ring. What's it called? Big fat snare or something like that. It's the world's biggest, fattest snare ring you can stick on that thing. Oh yeah, it's fantastic. It like drops it an octave. It seems like, so it sounds like Don Henley with his wallet glued to the top of the head, you know?
Nice, man. Hey,
so
he had a pretty fat wallet, didn't he?
He did. He was it was a Costanza wallet, I think, that Don Henley was using.
As in George
he had
Costanza?
a lot of back problems. Yeah. Yeah. Don Henley visited the chiropractor a lot, I think, because of that. You can look it up.
All right, cool. So a big fat snare ring. I like that, man. What are some other cool little drum accoutrements that you should give a shout out to?
I mean, everybody uses moon gels, right? Or some form of it.
Yeah.
You know what else?
But how do you keep them clean, though? That's the problem. They all get so nasty, and then you have to throw them away, it seems like.
Just chuck them in your mouth for a few seconds. Stick them back on the drum. They're fine.
Chew this.
Right. That would be so disgusting. You can actually use soap and water and rinse them off. They do get old, though. They get gummy and goopy, especially if they're left in the sun at all. They just turn into a glob. Don't
leave your moon gels in the sun.
It's your next hit.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a John Hartford song, actually. I was ripping off there.
That's real? That's a real thing?
It's a real one. But it was, don't leave your records in the sun, because they'll warp and they won't be good for anyone.
Oh.
Classic, man.
It sounds great.
Know it, rock stars. Okay, moon gels, groovy. And then, of course, like if you got an intern there, you can be like, hey, you got bad breath, chew on this for a minute. Okay, now give it back.
It's just as bad as the sun, actually. And chewing on it will ruin your moon gel.
What about those little sticky animal things that kids play with, and you throw them at the wall and they stick?
Wacky wall walkers. I was actually gonna say that. Yeah, you can use those.
Those seem to melt, though. They stay if you leave them up there, I think.
Yeah, they're cheaper.
Yeah. Any other cool drum stuff? What about on the kick drum? What are some things you like to do to make sure your kick drum sounds great and not like a pile of shit?
I tune it down pretty far for most of the stuff I do. If I'm doing jazz, then it's usually a smaller kid, and the guy that's playing knows what he's doing and can tune it. So you kind of get that boom, it has more of a tone to it.
Right. A full front head on the kit, or on the drum, rather. You might hear my neighbor's dog barking too.
Oh, that's nice.
But maybe not, because I'm mixing this through isotope.
Does it have a debarking?
I think it might. By the time this comes out, there's probably an isotope debark.
Right, isotope 10 debark.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds great.
All right, so tell us more about kick drums. So front head on the drum gives you the boom kind of thing. Now, you've also got a big drum space. Your room is big, which is, drums act differently in a big space than they do in a small home studio space. Even my studio, the walls are pretty nearby,
Do you have a lot of accoutrement on your walls?
I do. I have one wall has 4 inches of 703 going up about, 10 feet in the air from the floor and then it continues. I think it's like 14 feet above the snare drum, 14 or 16 feet up to the ceiling. So it's tall, but the wall is right behind you at the drum kit with the soft stuff on it. And then in front of you is maybe a few feet or, 3 feet, 4 feet max to the other wall with all the cables hanging on it and stuff like that. So it's kind of diffuse, but
right.
But you still get the low energy that builds up differently when the walls are nearby than if you're in a big open room like yours.
So do you get more low end on the wall? Are you using room mics?
I do. I use room mics coming over the railing from the loft, looking down, kind of storage loft up there, looking down towards the drums. And then recently I'm always kind of experimenting, to be honest.
Mm.
I put a mic down on the floor, a Roswell Pro Audio Delphos is down sort of floor level by the wall so that it's picking up more low end from the kick if I want it.
Is it aimed right at the kit or is it at the wall? It's
at the wall, aimed at the kit. Yeah. I could try aiming it at the wall. Everything's fair game, but sometimes, the challenge is like, when are you going to take the time to try all the different new ideas versus if you're trying to get some going quick on a session?
All right. Who gets to pay for your experimentation?
I do if it's my own stuff, but of course the conundrum is if you're recording yourself and you got more time, then it takes more time to make an adjustment because you're also the one playing the drums and stuff,
Right. Yeah.
But no, there's so many cool tricks for doing mics in front of the drum kit. You can put, if you're going to do the kick drum, you can do an inner mic and an outer mic and just record the kick that way, right?
Yeah, I do something that is, I'm using an EV868, and I put that so the diaphragm basically lines up with the front head. So it's kind of barely in the hole.
Okay.
And then I have a Lawson L47 MP.
And that's a large diaphragm condenser?
Yeah, it's a tube. It's a giant tube mic. Handmade there in Nashville. But anyway, that's what I use.
And you put that one on the drum seat and sit on it?
Yes, exactly. I put it underneath I put it right in front of the beater. No, I put it probably a foot. Yeah, probably about a foot in front of the kick drum. Then you have to make sure that the phase all matches up because there's a lot of low end material there, which if that's out of phase, it's going to suck.
Yeah. So what does that mean to make sure the phase matches up? Break that down for the rock stars.
Well, because it's not the same distance from the head as the other microphone, you have to make sure that the wave is going up. The sine, well, I guess it's not a sine wave, the audio wave is going up at the same time on both microphones. So if it is out of phase, the second microphone, just for example, might be going down in the negative when the mic that is closer to the kick drum is going up. In which case,
how would you even know that?
Things will cancel.
How do you know which way things are going?
It gets a real hollow sound. And a lot of times the low end can be, bigger, but it loses that tightness. And it's kind of funny. It like scoops out the middle and leaves you with the low lows, and then the highs just sound like garbage.
But this is also just a visual cue, just looking at the two tracks on Pro Tools.
No, I just listen to it. Listen to the drummer hit the kick drum, and if it sounds bad, I flip the phase.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a punchiness that you get when they're in phase. Sort of hits you in the chest more,
Yeah. And it's a funny thing too, because depending on the low frequency response in your studio, I find sometimes you want to check that phase, in the mix position. Sometimes you want to check that phase sort of where the low end is, biggest in your control room, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like it can boost and cut different frequencies. Some of them could be really deep. Some of them could be.
Yeah, it's really weird how the low end works when it's out of phase.
Yeah.
Because you'd think that the low lows would go away, but sometimes they seem like they add up.
Yeah, because it's not an exact perfect duplication of two sounds.
Yeah.
In or out of phase.
Right. And I do the same thing with a bass guitar amp. So, but we can talk about that later.
Let's talk about that. So what do you mean by that? So are you doing double mics on a bass amp?
I used to, and I don't do that anymore just because of the phase relationship stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to get a really good sound. I have a couple different bass rigs here, but the one that I end up using most of the time is a B15, like a flip top, and which has 115. So what I've learned is if I back off, I'm just using one mic. So I'm typically using a 414. I've also used the JZ V11.
Nice.
That's a nice big warm bottom end on that.
Yeah, that thing's got a huge low end.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So one of those mics, I will back off. It usually ends up being like 14 inches. And then I reverse the phase on the mic. And when I do that, it ends up being in phase with the DI because I'm recording a DI as well.
Oh, okay. So it's not like they're time aligned, but the low frequencies seem to line up in a positive way by the time it reaches the mic.
Yeah, it's I don't know how it works, but it's like it's almost like a cycle behind the DI.
Right. And I guess that would depend on what the root note was, but or it would just depend on, just the frequency, like if we're down in the 40 to 50 to 80 hertz range or whatever.
Right. That's a long wave.
Yeah. That might be what feels like the low end in a mix.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to work out pretty well when I do that. That's the closest way I can get it to being in phase with the DI. And some people will just high pass one of the two sources.
Right.
And I've never been able to get that to sound natural. So I don't do it. And I just make sure that the phase works between the two of them.
If you've ever wondered how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars, it's because I've been cheating by using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing on my voice RX breath control, D-click, D-clip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Check out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record up to 2 terabytes over USB-C with speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second, transfer your tracks in a flash, and take your samples and sessions with you to the studio or stage. The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is your waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof SSD that you can rely on. Use our custom link in the show notes to help support this podcast at macsales.com/rockstars. Let me break a couple of things down for the Rockstars, just in case this is strange territory for anybody. So the B15, when you say it's got 115, that's referring to the speaker in the cabinet. So it's a single 15-inch speaker cone. And, the bigger speaker cones they've got more low end too. They're just more bass. I mean, I've got a 115 cabinet too. And then the 414, when you mentioned that, Rockstars, that's the AKG 414, which is a switchable pickup pattern condenser mic that is, I can't remember, is that considered like a medium diaphragm or a large diaphragm?
I think it's considered large, but I don't know if it's quite an inch. Isn't an inch like where it's calibrated, the large diaphragm?
I don't know.
Like anything smaller.
Like if it's smaller than an inch, then you're no large diaphragm condenser. Right. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
That might be true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I want to say it's an inch though.
Yeah. Well, it's a great mic. I have an older version, the BULS, and it's really a beautiful sounding mic when I use it. Unfortunately, my switch is a little intermittent, so I tend not to reach for it just because
that's too bad. You don't use it just because of the switch.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we don't want to fuss with something that might not be working at first try in the studio,
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depends on the pressure level, I suppose.
So the V11 that you mentioned, that's the JZ mic. And that one, I really like those. I have one of them, and I find that it has an incredible low end response. I particularly notice it if I use it near the drums, and like you hit a kick drum or hit a floor tom or something, and then you get that like after rush of low frequency resonance that comes through a moment later. Like that's what it really does. It just kind of knocks me out. And it reminds me of a ribbon mic in that way. Like the Coles ribbon mic and or a RCA 44 has this like extra holy shit low end that can make an appearance when you use it right.
I haven't used one of those in years and years. The last time I used one of those was at a place I was interning at a long time ago. And I was recording a client by myself, and I put it in front of a guitar amp. And I remember the owner just walking in and saying, "Please tell me I don't see what I'm seeing happen in that other room." And I had to explain to him. It was the 444
in front of a screaming loud guitar amp or something?
Yeah, but I had to explain to him that the amp was down really low so I could use it. But still, anyway, that's the last time I used one of those. So
I can't remember. I seem to recall that the 44 is a pretty tough ribbon as ribbons go. I don't know.
This might have been a 77.
And I've used a 77. We actually, one of our great guitar sounds we got was a DX77. So that's Rockstar's one of the RCA ribbon mics, or I don't think, does AEA actually make a 77, or they make something that would be similar? Probably
something similar.
Yeah. So this would be a classic RCA mic, and it looks like a pill, it looks like a giant pill, like old school, like
well, they do make something like that for sure.
Yeah. And then what we did was we were recording like a Marshall 412 cabinet, pretty distorted power chord rock guitar thing. And then we discovered that the 77, if you like had it up at an angle, like 45 looking down towards the cabinet, it was just this amazing sound. So ribbon mics are fun. I mean, you can really get creative with them.
Mm-hmm. True. I haven't had good luck with them as overheads yet. Maybe I'll try it again. Maybe you've inspired me.
They can make great overheads, but again, every drummer, every space kind of might have different requirements. So you may or may not find the need for them.
So are you using them more on the bashers or?
Well, I put them up for my last basher, and it was so much better than my previous experience where I was using a condenser over them. And again, it was a question of matching the right drummer to the right mic. And then I left them up for myself, recording and messing around with some stuff. And I'm really enjoying that too. The nice thing about ribbon mics is you can kind of EQ the shit out of them and add more highs and really kind of sizzle the EQ a little bit, and it can sound cool still, which might be a challenge with a condenser.
Right. So were you doing them as like a spaced pair or?
Yeah, I just set them up as a space pair. Yeah.
Right
Two
on.
ribbon mics looking down. And, I think one of the challenges for me is I think I need to start using a hi-hat mic. So maybe I've got a pair of overheads. But then if I need a hi-hat mic, if I really need to hear the hi-hat on a groove, I can just bring that in, or I try and just scoot the mic over so that it's really hearing the hi-hat as on that side. And then the other one's like maybe really hearing the ride. And it's always it's always like, inevitably the real question is like, are you getting way too much or not enough of the crashes?
It's hard to balance that out. It takes a little bit of time. So, depending on what the drummer's setup is.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you've got the positioning of the cymbals, you got the sound of the cymbals, and then you got how they're hitting them. And then it seems like you get as close of a balance of those things as you can get. And then beyond that, you just got to bring the drummer in and just go, listen, notice how this cymbal's like sounds distant and this one sounds like it's ripping the mic apart. Can you just hit them at different volumes?
Right. Or move your cymbal. I mean, some can do that, some can't,
Yeah.
I always feel stupid. I'll ask somebody to move something maybe an inch or two if I have to, and that's it. Once you get beyond that, it's like, well.
Yeah, there's only so much you can ask of the musicians too.
Right. It's like my job to make this sound good.
Yeah,
So,
and the other thing that I find is helpful is rather than kind of ask, just have them listen and point out what you're up against and see if they take ownership of that and suggest, oh, well, let me hit that one a little lighter.
or if they look at you and say, so fix it, then you're like, all right.
You're like, all right,
Here we go.
Yeah. By the way, here's the invoice.
Right, exactly.
Okay, cool. So let's see. The JZV11. What are some other things you've been using that for?
Well, drums, like we just talked about, and I have a grand piano here, and I actually use it on that for some jazz stuff because it's a like super warm tone that you get out of the piano when you use those microphones, and it's especially if there's not a lot of other instrumentation going on, you can fill a lot of space with those things.
Yeah. Have you tried them on horns yet?
I haven't. I've been using, whenever I get a horn player in, he usually, there's one guy that I record often that requests an RE20. So I just use that and then usually double mic him with that and an R121, which is a Royer ribbon microphone, Rockstars.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's basically what I've been doing for horns, but I will try it on horns. That's a good idea. I haven't done any ensemble stuff with like horn groups since I've gotten them. So
where would you put the RE20 and the 121? So basically that's a dynamic mic that's originally designed. Was the RE20 originally designed to be just a radio vocal mic, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe so. And then they got used on everything from kick drum to bass cabinets and
horns. And so you have that and you have this ribbon mic. Where would the two mics go to record the horn and what horn is it?
Sax normally. It's an older alto sax. The way I do it, and it depends on who I'm working with, but we'll just say it's this person in particular. He likes to move around a lot. So I kind of pull him back a little bit and I angle the RE20 so it's getting like the top lip of the bell of the sax. So it's covering kind of the keys. And then the 121, I usually aim down a little bit. So they're sort of covering, and it does change while he's moving. It sounds super weird, but it works out. You have to get the phase right between the two microphones, but it tends to cover the entire instrument because it does sound a lot brighter coming out of the bell than it does out of the keys themselves on a horn like that.
Interesting. Yeah. So just for clarity's sake too, when we're saying phase, we're kind of referring to the polarity switch, right?
Right. The same way that we talked about with the kick drum.
Yeah. And just in case you're wondering, Rockstars, there is phase also referring to slight time shifts between things and sometimes like adjusting the timing of something, one mic against another or a bass DI against a bass mic can be done in Pro Tools or in your DAW. And then, if we're really going to get deep, then you've got like these phase adjustment, like waves. What is it?
Oh, in phase?
In phase. And then Sound Radix, Auto Align, stuff like that actually adjust the timing of all these, or the Little Labs IPP. But
yeah. I haven't used that on the horn thing. Maybe I will.
Oh, do you have one?
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, talk about what that box is.
It's called IBP, which means in between phase, and it basically gives you a dial, multiple dials to adjust the phase with another source. Well, it just adjusts the phase on that one source, but you're typically using it against another source. Just to get the phase to line up. And you can change the polarity. You can change the width or something like that. There are a couple other, I should just turn around and look at it maybe. I guess I'm using it out in the other room as a DI box, the world's most expensive DI box.
What is it? What's the IBP?
The IBP, because it can do that as well. And it has a reamp output in it too. So it's a pretty great utility tool.
Yeah, so that comes from Little Labs, Rockstars. It's Jonathan Little, who's a very cool dude.
He's awesome.
And he makes a lot of really interesting and high quality pieces of gear for the studio.
And high quality conversations as well.
Yeah. I have the the PCB. I think it is it's basically the guitar box that you can kind of plug your guitar in and then take 3 cables out to go to 3 different amps if you want to.
Oh, right.
And it's really handy, but I'm guilty of not using it as much as I wish I was. Do you feel that way with the gear in your studio? Do you sometimes feel like you're guilty of not using all your stuff that you've
got? I don't know. Maybe some guitar pedals, like smaller stuff, I would say. But like most of the instruments, the people that come in here, they're using a lot of my stuff, like amps, guitars, the drums. So,
and you work with a lot of independent bands and local bands and things too.
Yeah, that's mostly what I'm doing. So,
by the way, I mispronounced it. It's the PCP. Sorry, not PCB. I forgot what PCB is.
Different.
Isn't that a deadly drug?
PCP is.
PCP. Okay, there you go.
Isn't that like angel dust?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Like you don't know.
Angel dust. I just feel like I'm back in the 70s again.
Right.
Not that I should have known what that was when I was under 10 years old.
Right.
Okay, well, so working with local bands, I want to talk about that for just a minute. Every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low-end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia using only the best electronic components and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, rock stars. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, and V12, the mic you're hearing right now, at jzmic.com. Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mix Master Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the second half of the show, aka the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Jon Fintel, joining us from Relay Recording in Columbus, Ohio. You ready to jam, John?
I'm ready to jam. I've been waiting to jam.
That's like JJ.
The whole time.
Jam
like,
John.
we stop rocking and start jamming, please.
Yeah, I know. I got a really funny, I was checking out the podcast reviews and inevitably somebody just gives me a really hard time. It's like, all right, enough with the rock stars, enough with the jam session, enough with.
That's your thing.
Man, you got to have a thing. That's what I say. What else are you going to be like? And now we will begin again.
Are you ready to perform?
Are you ready to continue our conversation? All right, well, cool. So let's see here. What should we talk about next? I want to talk about you working with local artists, which pertains to your website. How are some of the ways that you find bands to work with? I mean, you're always working with cool indie stuff, and that's awesome. What do you think has helped you build a reputation? Do you proactively try and find new people to work with? Are there things that you would recommend anybody else with the studio do to start kind of building up a scene around their studio?
I feel like I haven't done that for quite some time. Um, on occasion, I will reach out to someone and say, "Hey, I'd like just to introduce myself," and then I point them to the website or point them to the Spotify playlist or something like that. Um, but I haven't really had to do that so much anymore. There's a lot of word of mouth. There's a lot of repeat business.
Mm-hmm. Do you
It's
feel like you're also in a market where there's a lot of competition, or how does that feel to you?
I think there's a lot of competition here because there are so many engineering schools. So, and, whenever anybody graduates from one of those, automatically they're like, I'm a producer. Look at me. I can record your record,
Yeah.
So there's that kind of stuff. But it's the people that I work with are typically beyond working with the just out of school kids. So it's, that's not really a big, not a lot of competition there, but there are a number of other good studios in town. So there's some for sure.
So really it's just sticking with it for a while and you just sort of build up.
Yes. I'm a recording
momentum.
cockroach.
Recording cockroach. How long have you been, I forgot, you told us in the last interview, but remind us again how long your studio's been around.
I started it in 2002. So we're in a couple months, it'll be the 20th anniversary.
Wow, man. Nice, dude.
I know. It's cool, but it's also like 20 years. I've been doing this in my own business for 20 years. It's insane.
Do you, well, I guess maybe you just answered this, but have you had experience with trying to have kind of fun events at the studio that just, bring people over to do stuff, parties or performances or any of that kind of stuff?
I used to have events where I would have live performances here. I haven't done it in probably 6 years or something.
Yeah.
But 2 of those were COVID. So I wasn't having any performances here then.
What were some of your favorite things that you tried out doing that?
I did like a grand opening thing and had like 4 bands play in here. It's a pretty big space, so I can have an audience of like, I don't know, at least 30 people or more, which doesn't sound like a ton, but when it's, you have a band over here, it's kind of cool,
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's like a small venue.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I've tried a lot of things. I think it's really fun. I mean, I recently did a listening party for a record I had produced. There's the neighbor's dog. So, well, once again, Rockstars, we'll see if Isotope is doing the trick.
Yeah, the dog has questions.
Yeah, the dog wants to know why we're rocking.
Is it phase or polarity?
So the just doing a listening party in my studio was an absolute blast. It was so much fun. And I was reminded of how much fun it is to do, social events at the studio of some sort or other.
Mm-hmm. I've never done a listening party. I should definitely do that. It's always been somebody performing or something like that.
Yeah, it was just such an easy way to take a recently finished record and just say, hey, let's do a special thing here where, the band can invite over their friends and fans to come listen. I can invite friends over and fans, whatever.
Yeah.
And, plus I got new speakers in, so it makes it a lot of fun to listen.
Right.
But
we
I feel like
talk about that, but you probably have already.
Well, you can talk about what do you want to know?
Well, tell me all about that system.
Well, I got the Carl Tatz Phantom Focus system installed in my control room, and that included treating the sonics of the room inside. So basically treating the room treatment, the wall treatment. So we put up soft panels on the wall, front wall behind the speakers, and there's a big screen there too. And then the corners, we put up sort of diffusion panels on top of my existing resonant panels. There's the corners are essentially, I think they're 1/4-inch plywood membrane across these panels, then with like an inch of 703 behind it going up. And then I can't remember if we stuffed some more stuff back there. We might have put a little bit in there.
Is that like a dampener if it's on a membrane like that?
It's kind of a membrane absorber. So it was part of my original design where I thought that was going to be a clever thing to do. And I think it helps kind of soak up, 40 hertz range or something. But, I can't get too technical because I'm just going to misquote a number. But the point is, there are different things you can do to treat the corners of the rooms. You can do, this was cool when I discovered this one because it turned out to be the name of a really cool indie rock band. There's the super chunk technique. That's where they get their name, as far as I know. So super chunk is when you take big rock wool soft stuff and you, like, let's say you have a square of it and you cut it across corner to corner so that you end up with two triangles, and then you flip one triangle and stack it on top of the other, and then you stick those in the corner and you just go from floor, stack triangles. So you're filling up the corner all the way to the ceiling. Wow. And what that does is that will basically absorb and control all frequencies in the corner. This is my understanding of it, because it's, filling it up. So whatever low frequencies in the corners, all frequencies come together. So lows to highs, everything in your room. And you could also just like build a panel in front of it. And then, if you use a fabric kind of, basically you're like angling off the corners from the floor to the ceiling. If you use fabric panels there, then you could also fill behind the panels, which is, that's what my friends Robin and Brad did in one of their rooms when they were designing a studio, and they used they sort of blew in this recycled denim insulation. Oh, yeah. And if you fill it up, that's a similar one. But anyway, not to get too stuck on the corner thing, but
denim is pretty technical. So.
Yeah, corners are where you can get the most low frequency bass traps going on in your studio, in your control room. And then we built another thing that was similar, that are up in the upper left and upper right, ceiling to wall, not in the corners, but running along. So like if I looked from where I'm mixing, if I looked over and then up into that corner, it's about like 3 or 4 panels deep. And they're just sort of like square Auralex panels, special Carl Tatz Phantom Focus Auralex panels. But essentially the point is you can have 703 and then you can put some more insulation behind those, and that helps build bass trapping there. And then on the back wall, there's about 4 and 6 inches deep of 703 back there. And that helped a ton. And then the ceiling are a whole series of smaller square panels that are hanging. So they come down off the ceiling and then they're suspended a little bit. So it gives us this really cool kind of, the whole thing looks like a futuristic spaceship now. And then the walls on the left and right, he actually we put mirror on the wall. So Really? It gives a sense of like it makes the room feel much bigger visually.
And acoustically, it's a good thing.
And then acoustically, there are columns that break that up that are sort of soft on the speaker side and harder on the back side, facing towards the back wall. I think that's right. It might be the opposite, but I think that's right. And cool. That's part of what Carl calls his acoustic lens design.
Oh.
And it's really cool. So it sounds killer. And that gave the room like, before we even put in my new speakers, just with the old speakers in there, I had these KRK Rocket 10s. They just sounded like night and day better. Just once we did the room treatment.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then after we did all that stuff, and then I got my my Argosy console in there so that I could actually have, the proper desk that I was going to work on. The goal was to have the, physical items, the big items in the studio in place the way it was going to be, and then we put in the PFS HD 1000. Did I just say that right? The Phantom Focus system. Yeah. PFS HD 1000 monitors.
And you had to do it after the big stuff was in there because that would change the acoustics?
Right. Exactly. Because then we're at the point of lining up the speakers on the stands and then actually, getting them laser aligned for the perfect placement. and positioned. And then the very last bit of, icing on the cake is a little bit of processing that processes for phase, accuracy, and equalization. And then there's also stereo. They're not, Carl's told me to not say stereo. They're not stereo subwoofers. They're mono. It's a pair of mono subwoofers in the corners.
The same thing is coming through both of them all the time?
I think so, although there may be a phase discrepancy going on between the two of them. But
where's the processing happen?
Well, it goes through a digital processor that's dialed in by Carl on its way to the amps.
Oh, okay.
So
I just wondered where in the chain it was.
It's the last thing. It's a outboard,
Gotcha.
processor that does that last little bit of processing and then goes to the amps and then hits the speakers and it sounds awesome.
Yeah, I bet. I have to come down there sometime.
Yeah. It's cool because when I sit in the mix position now, it's very, like I can really hear all the way down to the lows. I can hear all the way up to the highs. The depth and the immersion, like the sound field is really wide.
Mm-hmm.
So panning things really sounds wide, like, in a good way, in the same way that well, not the same way, but you put headphones on and you listen to panning and it's much more extreme sometimes than just a pair of speakers in front of you,
So you're probably mixing differently with this new system.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to subtly pan something from the center over to the left speaker or to the right speaker, you can hear every little subtle position along the way. So if you want to be that granular, you can. Now, this is no comment on whether you should or shouldn't be doing LCR, left, center, right mixing and panning versus, in between panning. That's an aesthetic choice, really, to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just cool that if you want to really dial things in and position things, you can hear that, and it's amazing. And it's making records for me has always been a balance of making things work if you're in a listening situation where you get kind of a minimal depth of field and imaging and minimal frequency response on speakers, or you're just in a car on a factory stereo, or what we call the real world, but also for those times where you get a chance to hear it on a really great system. It's like you want your mix to hold together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So are your mixes coming out narrower or wider, or neither of those?
To be honest, I feel like it's still brand new for me. I mean, I just got them installed over the holidays for me, so it's only been a few months or something since I've actually had them in there. So I'm just beginning my journey of, I think I'll ask me a year after I've mixed a bunch of stuff on it, and I'll give you some insights. But I can tell you this, I'm getting more opportunity to mess around with that when I'm recording myself and mixing that stuff back, and then, just taking it to the car to enjoy it. And my ability to make really cool, fun, bold decisions with it is just totally different for me. It's really, really
cool.
fun.
Are we getting more skadoosh?
We're definitely going to be getting some more skadoosh, and you will have already known that by the time this comes out.
Oh, okay.
That's
cool.
why
I looked for skadoosh on Spotify and I couldn't find it.
That's why you're going to be getting some more skadoosh very soon. I mean, in the past, very soon. In hindsight, yeah. I know it's like we just went through a time warp on every episode.
Right.
But hopefully that's fun for you rock stars, is to just hear a snapshot of the past when you hear this.
Right.
For 15 years, I recorded hundreds of bands like Jack White, Adele, and the Black Keys in my hay bale studio at the Bonnaroo Festival. I had to work fast and deliver finished mixes to the radio DJs within an hour, so I chose to use the solid-state Logic AWS 948 Plus for my mixing console. There's just no substitute for mixing on a real console. Until now, that is. SSL brings you the UF8 and UC1 controllers so that you can recreate the feel and speed of mixing on a console with the flexibility of mixing on your computer in your home studio. Paired with the SSL Channel Strip 2 and 4000B plugins, you can now get a world-class sound using real faders and real knobs to mix as fast as your ears will guide you. Levels, panning, EQ, and compression, they're all built right into the controllers. So go put the feeling back into your mixes at solidstatelogic.com. Adam Audio introduces the new A7V monitor for home and pro studios, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. The all-new A-series line of monitors delivers the same highly accurate, transparent sound and unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design that has made Adam Audio famous for over a decade, but now introduces new innovations such as the rotatable high-frequency propagation system waveguide, allowing the XART tweeter to disperse sound with controlled consistency, and DSP-based room correction and speaker voicings. Using the A-Control software or SonarWorks and a measurement mic, you can now integrate advanced filters directly onto the DSP on board the speaker to help compensate for imperfect room acoustics without introducing annoying latency or requiring plugins. This allows you to tune your monitors for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want to meet your ever-evolving studio needs. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at adamaudio.com. So, I just think that having monitors where you can feel confident about what you're listening to while you're working is huge, because it makes it easier for you to focus on your creative decisions and not be stuck in second guessing yourself because of the sound of your speakers,
Right. I have a tiny bump here. I'll come clean. I'll say it. I have a tiny bump here around 125 hertz in this control room. And I know it well enough that it doesn't affect me. But if somebody else was mixing in here, it might.
If
I
they
don't know.
weren't sure about it, yeah.
Yeah, it's tiny. I mean.
Is that because your control room is pretty spacious as well?
I don't really know. I mean, it's the control room's big, but I don't know if it's that big.
Well, definitely bigger rooms lower the room modes.
The fundamental
modes of the room, yeah.
Right.
So the bigger, if you have a really big room to mix in, then you're not going to have the low end issues in the same way.
Right.
But one of the things that I learned about that, as we're here chatting about room design and stuff like that, from Carl, is that, he's talked about this on the podcast, is that typically we have our near field monitors and they're away from the wall a little bit. And then, there's a few feet, 3, 4, 5 feet to us or something where we're sitting. Depends on where you set things up. And there's also a distance where the lower energy from that speaker is going down, hitting the floor and bouncing up to where our ear is. And that causes a cancellation that is commonly around the 70 hertz range, a big dip. And that's a common challenge, apparently, for near field monitors set up, when you're doing a pair of whatever.
That's interesting. Why is it 70?
I think that's just the distance, the frequency and distance of a typical speaker height down to the floor and back up to our ear.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's not an upper range where it's bouncing off the desk and bouncing off the console. It's in the lower range where it, goes around that and hits the floor and bounces back, or ceiling,
Right.
So that's something to explore, Rockstars, is just, if you can get a mic and put it where you're mixing and play some, scroll some sine wave frequencies from low frequencies up through high and just sort of see what your meter's doing on the mic at the mix position.
Right. Some will jump out.
Yeah. Don't have your mic going back through the speakers though. That's called feedback.
Right.
Well, so, all right. So no real tips on finding local bands, huh? Just be around for 20 years and all of a sudden you're making records.
Yeah. I would say that's actually probably probably it.
All right.
Be a recording cockroach.
Be
just
a
like
recording.
me.
Yeah. Stick around. Don't quit. Don't give up.
Right. Don't move on with your life. I'm kidding.
What about things like email lists? Did you ever get into building an email list for your studio where you're sending out messages to your,
I never
fans
did.
of the show?
I never did.
Studio?
No.
All
just
right.
social media stuff. I mean, you have to do your posts on that. And I usually have somebody that helps me with that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it freaks me out. But
what kind of stuff? Well, that's, this can be good. So for somebody else who's freaked out, what are some things that you would post on social media or ask somebody else to help with?
Well, I have somebody come over and take pictures sometimes, and then they post things that, from whatever band is in here. And I think you talked about it before, like what things are good for posting. Like I just took video of somebody that was singing. They're doing their initial take or whatever on a track. And I did not post it because I thought it might be a bad idea, even though he nailed it. I have to ask him still if I can post it. But stuff like that, you just have to sort of be discerning on what is cool and what is not. You can always ask the artist too.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of hashtags and what gear you're using and stuff like that. Some people do, here's a brand new piece of gear that they're opening up. And I think that's cool, but that's typically cool for other engineers more so than, artists.
So the stuff that's interesting for artists is to see another artist in the studio making music?
Yeah, I think so. Especially if it's like, it's cool to have things with no sound. If I can get video with, like I take it from in the control room and then just shoot out the window, but I have the sound on so they can hear the song and they get a little snippet of the track as well. If it's just the video with no sound, it's like, oh, that's cool. That guy's in there. But if it's like a cool song or something, then have that little clip of audio in there,
Yeah, no, I dig that. And it's exciting. Sometimes it's hard to do because we find ourselves hustling so much to get the recording done in the studio. It's
totally
smart to have somebody else come in and help with that.
Yeah. Then I don't have to worry about it. And I don't love being in the shots, but it's not a bad idea to be in some of the photos yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it, you can't.
When you mentioned hashtag, you're saying the gear stuff, instead of making that the focus of it, just put a hashtag about it in there so that it kind of shows up on somebody's radar if they want it to.
Right. Like what you're using or, analog or, whatever.
Yeah. What do you feel like is some of the other things that bands are excited about when it comes to the studio? Do they want to know about analog? Do bands want to know about consoles? Are there particular pieces of gear or mics?
Less mics than other stuff. I try to have a lot of instruments and stuff like that here. That's what they get excited about. Yeah. They might say that's a sweet looking console and, but it's not a conversation that goes very far. It's like, yeah, this is what it is. These are the records that were done using this board. And then, they think that's cool. And then we move on.
Yeah, that's so smart. I mean, I think you just made a great point. So as the engineer producer in my studio, I might be excited about the new piece of gear, but the band that I want to work with would probably much rather see somebody just playing the drums really well for a second in a clip, or like, somebody getting a cool Hammond organ sound with the Leslie spinning.
Yeah.
The instrument itself is what they're actually going to play if they came to the studio. So they'd be much more interested in that.
Yeah, totally. I like occasionally you can do sound clips with like VU meters bouncing or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about shooting it from the control room is if you can point your phone through the glass or whatever, so you see what's going on out there, but they're hearing your version of it in the speakers.
Right. They're not out in the room where you just hear drums and everything else is isolated.
Yeah. Plus you're giving the impression, hey, this is something that's being recorded. Come record at my studio.
Right. This is what happens.
What are you really excited about right now?
I have some projects coming up that I'm excited about.
Cool.
A band called Girl Fox that I've been producing for a while. COVID really slowed things down. Like we started this towards the beginning. I know.
Imagine
breaking news, rock stars.
Yeah. Just in case, rock stars, in case you haven't heard anything about it yet.
Right. You will. Eventually it'll come
So you
out.
feel in it, things are picking up. And of course, when this comes out, it'll be like, man, I forgot about when things were picking up.
Yeah. You'll forget if you're lucky.
Yeah. So yeah, who's this? Tell us about this artist.
It's a 4-piece from like Northwest Ohio, not far from the town that I went to high school in. But they're younger guys, and let's see, we've done a full length, an EP, and we're doing a full length now. That I still have to mix, and we're shopping it and everything else. So they're trying to get somebody to help pay for the mixing and mastering and all that, besides me. Yeah, so I think that's going to be a big record. They sound kind of like the Strokes or the Killers. It's in that vein.
Nice. Girl Fox, was that the name?
Yeah, I put a song in your extra list.
Yes, so. Great. Yeah, so Rockstars, make sure you scroll down and hit the playlist in the show notes.
Hopefully it's out by the time this is out.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about what that means to shop it. So some of us will listen and be like, I don't even know where to begin for something like that. So if you were giving advice to somebody about like, finding a band, wanting to shop something, what does that even look like?
I'm not the grand poobah of shopping things.
Well, you are compared to somebody who doesn't know shit about it.
That's true. Grand poobah. So what you do is you find labels that you think would be interested in your music. Like, they have bands that sound like yours. So you email them, you ask if it's okay. It's like solicitation, I believe. You ask them if it's cool if you send something there, or if there's a special way that they want it, or if there's a name that you can send it to directly. And hopefully they say yes, and you send it there, and they'll tell you if they're interested or not. And there's other things. It's not just labels. You can, like if you're trying to get a manager or an agent to set up tours, you can do that. Also distribution. Like I know some bands that have gotten distribution deals from shopping their stuff around, which is definitely helpful.
So what's the difference between a distribution deal and a record deal?
Why are you asking me this, Lidge? I don't know that. I'm not a lawyer. I think the distribution deal has less as far as like the ownership of the masters, but they take a chunk of the sales.
Yeah. Do you think a distribution deal is printing the CD as well, or is it more like you're responsible for? And distribution, of course, there's two types, right? There'd be physical distribution, like getting the CDs into stores, getting vinyl into stores. And then
electronic.
Yeah, there can be. I mean, like a DistroKid is essentially an online distribution service.
Right. And they don't do it's all electronic with them, right? They don't do any hard copies.
CD Baby is, I guess, if you want to order CDs. I did a bit of a shootout on the Facebook group, Rockstars. If you're not in our Facebook group and you'd like to be, we got a place, a recording studio, Rockstars, where you can interact with everybody and jump in with stuff. So just go to Facebook, groups, recording studio, Rockstars has to be in there. Make sure you answer the 3 questions so that you get let in, because you won't get in if you don't answer the questions, because then technically you would be a bot. But I posted in there about what were people using for releasing their music. And it was fascinating to hear people's discussions about that. It was like, you got like DistroKid, which will put it in all these online places. You've got some people were swearing by CD Baby, and they'd used it for ages.
Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing is that you attempt to shop it or get something going with someone else before you just poop it out. That drives me nuts when I'll do a record that I think is fantastic and has a chance to really do something, and they just put the record out, and then what are you you can't shop a record after it's been out, really.
Yeah, true. Right. You want to get it to the label so they can be the one to release it.
Right. Exactly. And they can do all their media stuff and everything else. If you just dump it out there, it's like, well, what are we signing up for here? You don't have a record that's ready to come out. You already released it.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting to me was people talking about, the majority of us, of course, here Recording Studio Rockstars are going to be doing self-release stuff,
Mm-hmm.
It's rare that somebody's ambitious to go, seek out a deal.
I guess it depends on
cool
if you care, right? If you're trying to make it and do a tour and all that, then, and if you don't, then just put it out.
So here's the survey about self-release stuff. DistroKid got the most number of people. Second was CD Baby. Third was Bandcamp. And then it went down to some other options too. But what was cool about Bandcamp was people pointing out that that's a way to, if there is some initial sales and money opportunity to come in for the release of your music, that's a place where you can put it out and you'll get the biggest cut. Like you can actually, I don't know, you can charge $10 for a record and you get almost all 10 of it, or maybe you do get all 10. I don't know. And then one of the things that I learned from that thinking was, why not put it out there first? So if you're just doing a self thing and you're not doing the label thing, promote it to your friends, family, fans, whatever, and make, have an initial release there. And then after you've done that, then go do it on a big, a DistroKid CD Baby where it just kind of hits everywhere. And now it's free everywhere for
becomes streamed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was a clever way to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
What else are you excited about in the studio right now?
I have a band called Speaking Sons that is, they're shopping there. We did a 3-song EP that they're shopping right now that I have high hopes for it. And one of the people in the band actually is one of those people who just knows famous people for no good reason.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been shopping. I'm not going to name any of the people that he knows, but he's been sort of shopping it to them, and there's some interest there. So that's about it. I don't know. I could be wrong. This might be something to cut out later, but Snarls I should be producing another, at least a single with them.
Cool.
Soon.
The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is your super fast and rugged pocket-sized portable USB-C SSD that keeps your music safe in the studio or on the stage. With storage of up to 2 terabytes and speeds of up to more than 1 gigabyte per second, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof, so there's no need to worry about your music anymore. Find the new Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars and use the custom link below in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. There's a lot of junk that needs to get cleaned up in a podcast or music mix. Boomy pops on the microphones, piercing sibilants, background noise, harshness, distortion, wild dynamics, and EQ correction. And all this editing and mixing cleanup would be impossibly time-consuming were it not for the magic of Isotope RX, Ozone, and Neutron. Isotope gives you a collection of plugins for mixing in your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with set it and forget it simplicity. Check out the new Repair Assistant plugin to help you find the perfect mix prep settings for any instrument. And the standalone RX app includes new features like text transcription and multiple speaker recognition for easy editing and navigation. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Well, so tell us a little bit about these projects. Like, what were some of, with Girl Fox, for example, you mentioned them sounding a little bit like the Strokes. I think of the Strokes as being one of those bands that came along where it was like this wonderful combination of lo-fi precision and a hell of a lot of attitude,
Well, they definitely have an attitude.
Yeah. So what are some of the production takeaways from you working with Girl Fox? What are some of the techniques that you use to record those
Well,
guys?
well, I wanted to make it kind of raw without it sounding super underproduced. So the performances, I wanted it to be tight. But I didn't want to like add too much stuff. I did some things that were borderline goofy. Like I added some synth parts, like little melody lines with a Casio, just stuff like that. That was sort of lo-fi, but sort of clever lo-fi. At least that's what I was shooting for anyway.
I love doing the Casio, man. We did, we had a synth intro on the Hide Your Mama's record, and it was just like busted out the cheapest keyboard we had, recorded it on the V11, actually, on that microphone. And then just, in the mix, it goes through Sound Toys, and now it sounds otherworldly.
Right. Right. So, but it becomes like a signature thing of that song, right?
Totally.
So totally. Of that song. It's
Yeah. Well, the takeaway, the reason I'm going into detail is just that reminder that, like, yeah, sure, we've all got a bazillion software synths, but sometimes the simplest thing is just a little Casio keyboard, play a cool line on it, record on a mic, and then process it a little. And now you got something that sounds like nothing else.
And unique. Yeah. It doesn't sound like, who else is going to do that exact chain?
Well, nobody. Now everybody's going to do it, of course, now that we talked about it.
They don't know what you did, though, after the fact. You said processing. That could be anything.
What was the Casio you're using?
What is this thing?
You guys have the SK1 or any of that stuff?
No. This is like I'm actually looking at it. It's leaning up against the wall in the control room.
From this one comes from the mall, the piano store.
Yeah, it's got a speaker in it. That's how you know it's good.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So I have one of those, and then I have like an SK10, which is a little baby one.
Ooh, I don't know the SK10.
Let me double check.
I've got the 1 and the 5.
Yeah, it's an SK10. I don't.
Yeah, man, play some riffs.
No, I have no riffs to play. What I use this for half the time is finding notes and figuring out what key things are in.
Yeah, big time.
Just stuff like that. I'm not big on the music theory. I'm not great at that stuff. I know enough, but that keyboard comes in handy. It's like, which note are you going for?
Do you have, when you're going to do, usually that's vocals, right? You're describing the process of working with the singer. Because singers lose track of where the note is when they're about to hit the mic.
And they're like, I don't know what the melody is of this song I've been singing for the last 5 years.
Yeah, especially if it's harmony vocals and it's sort of new parts.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But I do find it really useful to have a keyboard of some sort in the control room so you can play that part for them. It's also useful to send them out there with a keyboard sometimes so that they can.
Oh, yeah. So they can hear what note they're. Yeah.
Yeah. They can. They're like, oh, yeah, it was these 3.
That's why you need a speaker on your Casio.
That's why you need a speaker on your Casio, indeed.
Yeah, so they can play it and just hear it out in the room.
And then here's a good ninja tip for you rock stars, because you don't necessarily already have a actual keyboard, but you might have an iPhone, for example. Just GarageBand. Just make a GarageBand session that is literally just the piano sound, just the keyboard. So when you open it every time, it's just that GarageBand piano. And that's such a handy way to quickly find some notes. But, doing that where you use a simple tool like a keyboard to help somebody find the notes, then you show them what notes those are, show them how to play them. And then that way, when they go back out to the mic, they can be like, oh yeah, what was that note? That's a huge help.
Right.
Another thing that I like to do, I don't know if you do this, but I find that sending somebody out like, hey, let's do some harmony parts on this. And you just send them right out to the mic and they put headphones on. No, not unless they're really, really comfortable doing that. If you're searching for parts, bring them into the control room and just sing with the speakers together first until they find that part. But
does that happen a lot for you?
It does, big time. Yeah, because people can start coming up with ideas. I can come up with ideas. I mean, I'll sing parts too and suggest them if it's the right, if it's the right production like that. But it's just much easier for me in the control room around the speakers because everybody's comfortable. You just feel like you're singing along with something. But I'll tell you, same thing. That moment from okay, now that was a cool idea. The moment they walk out of the control room, go over to the mic, put the headphones on, you put it into record and go, they've already forgotten the part. So that's that point at which you show them, okay, here's the notes on the iPhone or the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
Take them out with you.
Or even hearing playback in a different section of the song, especially if it goes from one section to another section and they're supposed to be in right at the beginning of the key change or even a chord change. It's easy to lose what note you're supposed to be singing.
Totally, especially because, we're hitting the chorus now. There's a chord change, and now we're also hitting a harmony note that's against the new chord, not the verse, last chord of the verse.
Yeah, I've doubled sections of songs, like just a couple bars with that chord that they need to sing, just so they can get that note. And I'll put them in record so they can hear themselves. And then when it's time to be on, then they're actually singing with it.
Yeah, another trick is to have somebody, if you can find the note on the keys before you press play on the music, start singing the note that you're going to sing at the beginning of the chorus and press play on the track, or even put it into record ahead of time and just sing the shit out of that note that you're supposed to start with. Don't even care if it goes along with the verse, so that you got it stuck in your head, and then immediately go right into the chorus and sing that part. That can help too.
Oh yeah, totally. Sometimes you have to give them another track to do that so they don't ruin something that's just before it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or put them in input.
Right.
All right, cool. So what other tips we got? What else are you excited about? When you were doing the Girl Fox stuff, did you have to get into programmed drums? A lot of the Strokes stuff, I felt like there was a lot more programmed drums in there than we were led to believe.
Their drummer kicks ass. So he's one of the better drummers in town. So I didn't have to do anything like that. It was better with just him.
What about, did you have to set up a hi-hat mic or get like real precision on the hi-hat?
I did set up a hi-hat mic for him, but I don't know. I mean, I've only mixed a couple of the songs, 4 of the songs, and I don't know if I've even used it. Just because I was able to capture with overheads. I use like this, either a Crown CM700, which is a pretty weird small diaphragm condenser. And it's not super pristine. I like kind of a trashier hi-hat. I don't like it to be bright and sizzly so much. You want that sort of the mid-range and upper mids. Yeah. And stuff. Yeah. Like the 1K-ish garbage hi-hat is what I like. And if I don't use that, I use like a KSM 137, the little Shure small diaphragm. That works pretty well too, which is the same mic I use for underneath the snare a lot, or above the snare when I team it up with a 57. Where do you put the mic on the hi-hat? Because I'm not using a ton of it, I usually make it so it just keeps the other stuff out. So it's actually angled away from the snare drum, and sort of, it's not up on the bell, and it's not right on the edge. So it's kind of like in between the bell and the edge of it, but it's angled like at a 45-degree outside, like away from the snare. Yeah. Because that bleed drives me nuts. It's like you want to ruin your snare drum sound, and Yeah, that's one of the things about polarity checking is if I was doing a hi-hat and a ride mic, I'll try to remember to check the polarity on those mics against the snare as well to make sure that they're not somehow causing the snare to sound smaller. Right. Give you a goink. Yeah, a goink. Everybody needs a good goink. I hate the goink. Okay, cool. What about Speaking Sons? What were some production adventures for you on that? That was a pretty big adventure. They have 6 people in that group. I think there's 6. 2 keyboard players, 2 guitar players, a drummer, and a bass player. So, yeah. So, and we did almost all of it live. We added the synth player later, and then we redid some of the guitars. But for that stuff, I kind of made it. It's more like it reminds me of like Grizzly Bear or War on Drugs, that kind of stuff, or a combo. So I used a lot of room mics, and then did my usual, like a couple mics up on for guitars, like a couple mics up on the cabinet, and then a room mic. and then record like a stereo track into Pro Tools. So I'm blending the two close mics, and then I have the room mic on the other side. So I ended up using a little bit more of the room mic just to give it some spaciousness, but it also had to not get in the way because there was a synth, a piano, two guitars,
Right.
It also had to, there's some fancy footwork frequency wise to make it all clear, I guess.
Yeah. So it's like if you've got a bunch of individual instruments, instead of just hard panning them by having an additional room mic, you can pan that to the other side. And it just it gives you a flexibility in making that guitar join the stereo mix a little bit more instead of feeling like this isolated element all on its own over to one side.
Right, this tiny little thing. It makes everything sound like a little bit bigger, and you can use like less reverb because you have that room sound in there, and because it's such a big room, it's like automatic reverb,
Yeah. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. And then, so what would be a good choice for a room mic in a situation like that?
Lately, I've been using a Beyer 201.
That's the ribbon mic?
No, it's a dynamic, but it's like a coil, moving coil dynamic. It's the M201 TG. Okay,
so does that give us more of a focus on the mid frequencies being a dynamic? I mean, is it like...
It does, but it's warmer. It's like a little bit warmer version of an SM7.
Okay, cool. And what about compression? Does compression come into play for a room mic on a guitar?
I compress it a little bit, and depending on the part, if I want it to be really wide, then I'll use a stereo. I'm using a stereo, like the distressors as a stereo pair, but whether I link them depends on the part. If I wanted it to be pretty wide, then I'll engage the stereo link, and then they're compressed the same way. But I'll combine the two mics on one track, and that's going into the left, and then the room mic is going into the right. So it's coming. That's when I'm using the console. So I'm the group outputs is where I'm compressing.
Okay, cool. So a couple of close mics plus a room mic. The close mics are panned to the left. The room mics panned to the right. The close mics go through one of those distressors. The room mic goes through the other distressor. And then if you choose to link the two distressors, then that means their compression will work together. And that tends to give you a wider feel to the whole sound.
Right. Exactly.
All right, man. Did I get an A+ for saying that back?
Yeah. Yes. It needs some sort of translation from whatever I was saying. You did a fine job.
That's my job.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What else about working with those guys? Any fun stuff in the synth land?
In the synth land, boy, they have a guy that played a Juno. Was it a 106? Something like that. And the parts that they came up with were perfect and just like added a whole new level to the whole thing.
Does that get recorded direct, or does that go through a guitar amp?
I did it direct, just because what we were going for didn't need to be like amped, Yeah. It didn't need to have that frequency shaping that an amplifier would do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. How about mixing these guys? I guess you haven't quite got to all the mixes on though, but do you think these will be projects where you mix it in the box or mix it on the console?
with that project, I mixed it a couple times just because there were changes, but I did do that through the console, and it was mostly stemmed out. So I had the drums going to two channels, just like the dry drums, I guess you'd call it. And then I have two channels for super compressed drums. So, and then I blend those two together. And the compressed drums I'm running through the pair of distressors. And then I split the vocals out and the bass, keyboards, guitars, and then background vocals. And I also have another two channels for effects.
And that's when you're mixing it on the console?
Yeah, which is what I did for them. So, and luckily I was able to leave everything set up for a couple weeks just to finalize all of that.
Yeah.
Then I mastered it analog as well.
Are there any tips you want to share with the rock stars if they're going to try breaking something out through a console, even if it's like a simple mixer that they've got or something? Do you have a system for kind of making sure that the alignment of the faders is right on the console before you do this? Or is it more like you just bring the faders up to wherever they sound good and that's all you got to worry about?
Well, I calibrate everything. This board has like the line input knob adjustment. So I calibrate everything. Then get the
Can you explain a little bit what that means to calibrate the console in that situation?
I go through on Pro Tools, I'll just set the output to I guess it'd be like 17 or 18. They're called A, 17 and 18.
So that'd be a stereo pair coming out of Pro Tools, hitting the console as a left and right pair?
Yeah, you could do it mono as well. But just for speed, I did it as a stereo pair. So you set up the signal generator to a 1K tone and make sure the fader is at 0 and the master fader is at 0. And then you can send a tone out of Pro Tools into the console and make sure the console is set to give you -20 at the master. And I'm using like a Waves Paz analyzer plugin to really get into the level, I guess.
Right. So that you're sort of measuring how it's hitting the stereo mix.
Yeah, I'm just making sure everything is going into the console evenly and coming out evenly. Right. And when I'm doing everything through the board, I'm basically setting the faders at 0. Actually, it's -5. It's just how it ends up working out with gain staging and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm setting the faders at -5 and doing all the automation inside Pro Tools.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then the calibration basically makes it so that you're starting out at a good starting point on the console, so that even if you had to come back and pull the mix up again next week, you could at least start with those fader settings again.
Right. You have to.
That's the same as where you left off.
You have to have some ability to recall, and I can do a recall, but it's never like 100% with all the EQs and everything else. But at least the calibration can be 100%.
Right. So you'll actually, if you have a mono track coming to the console and it's the bass, you'll reach for the EQ on the console and EQ the bass a little bit if you're feeling it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. The EQs on this board are fantastic. So I'll do that. And then if I have to do a recall, I do, well, at the end of every, I'll set that up for a project. So I'm leaving the console. Once I get my initial things set, I'm pretty much leaving the console the way it is and not messing with it. I'm not changing all that for each song all that much, because that would make recall just unmanageable. So what I do is just use the voice recorder on my phone and go down every channel and just describe what I'm doing. So I can just hit go on that recording and it'll say like on the bass, it's on channel this, and the EQ is set like the high mids are at this, and
I like that. You're like giving your future self instructions.
Right. And every time I do it, I'm like, man, I just sound like a dumbass.
I do something a little bit similar. Whenever I really need to remember how to do something, I might just put my phone into video and then just record a walkthrough video, and I'll point the phone at stuff that I need to look at. I'll talk about it. But the cool thing about the voice recording is a video can be cool, but sometimes when you're trying to like recreate that thing, I don't care whether it's resetting a console or like a vocal chain, or you're just trying to set the guitar pedals the same way. A lot of times the thing that you're trying to do to reset it, you're crawling around behind the gear or something like that. And it's hard to hold the phone and like look at the video at the same time. So doing the voice thing is smart because you're telling yourself, like this podcast, you're trying to be really clear and tell yourself what you're supposed to do.
Right. You can be very specific and detailed that way too. With a phone, I tried doing it with the video way, and found that the angle of my phone to the knob made it difficult to pinpoint where exactly it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even as you have to move the phone as your camera, like across it, and try to guess where the knob actually is.
Yeah. Well, right on, man. Well, we are coming to the end of our podcast, and it's been awesome to hang with you again.
You too.
Let's go to closing question, actually, if that's all right. We're going to take, this is one you answered before, but I'm sure it's all brand new today. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you're going to go back in time and find young Jon. I don't know, maybe 20 years ago when you started your studio, or maybe it's more recent than that. But
when I was 15.
When you were 15, and you want to give yourself one bit of advice, you say, listen, dude, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a recording studio rock star yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I think it might be less as like an amazing engineer, but I think it would help me. It would have helped me back then. You shouldn't worry about what other people are doing as far as who got this band or who got that band to come into their studio or whatever. You just have to focus on doing the best job you can do. And I think I worried about that too much when I was younger and starting out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think just for my own peace of mind, I would tell myself that.
Yeah, I definitely worried about that stuff.
Yeah. And it's funny when you're younger, it's like you're real competitive and you're hungry,
Yeah.
But you kind of have to be like, it's cool.
I felt so much more at ease when I stopped being competitive and I started just being part of the gang. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Being part of the community or
like
whatever.
Happy, like excited to send somebody else some work if it was the right thing to do.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Because most of them are cool people.
Yeah. And it also makes it easier when you get to that point. You start hopefully being able to say no to a project because it wasn't right for you instead of saying yes to everything.
Oh, yeah. I say no a lot now.
Yeah, do you?
I love it. I love saying no.
Say no right now. Say no right now.
No.
All right. No problem. Well, dude, thanks for hanging with us, man. Let the rock stars know, where can they go find you online, learn more about you. Maybe they're ready to just make a killer record in a killer studio, and they're up in that Columbus, Ohio area. Where should the rock stars go? How do they find you?
They can go to relayrecording.com. They can go to jonfintel.com, which is JONFINTEL. Or my Facebook or Instagram, that is both the same. And I do a bunch of mixing for like other bands that are not in Columbus, and mastering too. So hit me up.
Right on. And I'm now going to end the podcast by correcting my pronunciation of your name, Jon Fintel.
That's me.
Thanks, dude. Well, great to hang with you again, man. And Rockstars, thank you for listening. Jon, we'll see you around the studio, dude.
All right, man.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Spectra 1964, JZ Microphones, Atom Audio, Solid State Logic, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription for access to many plugins. At jzmic.com, use the code ROCKSTAR for 40% off the V47, V67, and V12 microphones. That's what you're hearing my voice on right now. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.